Episode 107 of the Habs Culture Podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz, alongside Liam Baum. It's been a little while since we recorded. Summer's underway, but it doesn't change the fact that the Montreal Canadiens have been very active recently. The draft was right around the corner, June 27th, this past Friday. And I think Liam and I and many Habs fans were going into this draft thinking, what are the Habs going to be doing with that 16th and 17th overall pick? They're in a position to probably start competing, being a little bit more aggressive and not necessarily depending on their younger guys or younger draft picks to be a part of, the plan for the future that Gordon and Hughes have put into place. And we saw it full out. We saw it full out the day before the draft. The Montreal Canadiens traded away their 16th overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft, the 17th overall pick, and Emil Heineman for Noah Dobson via sign and trade, and then signed him to an 8-year, $9.5 million contract, making him the highest paid Montreal Canadiens player on the active roster, aside from Carey Price. Liam, initial thoughts on the trade, initial thoughts on giving up those two picks in the trade, and initial thoughts on giving up a guy like Emil Heineman when I think a lot of people had anticipated that it was probably going to be Logan Mailloux.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that come after this trade happened, but first of all, I just want to point out the fact that Hughes did a great job at addressing the Montreal Canadiens' probably most significant need other than needing a 2C at this moment, but getting a right-handed shot defenseman who's big, offensive, and can move the puck is very difficult to get in the league. So Kent Hughes did a great job at addressing that need. Noah Dobson had 70 points just 2 seasons ago. And this year, only 3 defensemen in the league had more than 70 points. So it's not something that comes across every year. And this was an amazing trade for the Canadiens. The assets that we gave up were relatively significant, giving up 2 mid-first-round picks, as well as a rookie who showed a lot of promise this season. It's a lot to give up. But if we're looking back at the trade trees, the Canadiens got that 17th overall pick from the Calgary Flames for taking Sean Monahan. So it was a free first-round pick. And Emil Heineman was part of the Tyler Toffoli trade, I want to say 2 years ago, when he was traded to the Flames at the trade deadline. And Toffoli didn't stay in Calgary. So this was like basically giving up Montreal's first-round pick straight up for Noah Dobson. And I think looking back at it, it's an amazing trade, even though, again, it was 2 first-round picks. This was something that's been brewing for a while, honestly, and this was just a great, great sign for the Canadiens as well, considering that he left money on the table, apparently, and was asking 10.5 from the Islanders. So Montreal locks him up with the cap going up in the next 2 years. This is going to look like a great deal.
I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, as I mentioned before, this draft, you're going to go out and pick 2 guys that are 18 or 19 years old, on the brink of being 19 years old. What happens then? Well, the core that the Canadiens have in place is probably has an average age of probably 24 years old, give or take, maybe even a little bit younger, but probably around that age. You got to think that acquiring Noah Dobson is kind of along the same vein of what the Canadiens did when they went out and got Kirby Dach, when they went out and got Alex Newhook. They're trying to build this team as everyone kind of grows together. We always repeat that. And this is proof in the pudding once again. I think this is a much more significant move. I think Noah Dobson on any team in this league, well, not any team, but on many teams in this league is a 1D. The Canadiens now have the ability to mess with some things, right? You get the right shot, 25 years old, 200 pounds, right? Big boy. He's been knacked a little bit for his defensive, I don't want to say liabilities, but his ability to defend around the net, but it doesn't change the fact that he has a ton of upside as a point producer, and we love that. We'll get into the pairings and what we think soon, but I just think that ultimately I think this is a game changer. I think this is a difference maker for this team, and I think this is where they gave up their 2 picks. And I think now it's like, okay, we're in that area where we want to compete, and we want to compete now. So next year, they made the playoffs this past year. I think this year we're going to see a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, you're at the point where you just make the playoffs. You need to take another step now. And trading 2 first-round picks like you said, they're guys who are probably not going to be ready for a good 2-3 years. And then at that point, Suzuki's 28, Caulfield's 27, 26. So you have to realize at a point that it's time to compete. It's no longer time to develop. And, you always need to develop guys in your system, but the Canadiens are ready to compete. And even just going out and getting Laine last season, that was a step. And now this year going to get Dobson. And I think free agency is going to be a huge factor on the Canadiens season this coming year. So it's going to be very exciting to see how this team is going to take the next step. But let's take a look at how the Canadiens lineup may shape up next season. Obviously, again, free agency, there's a bunch of Canadiens players who do need to be re-signed or let go, and potentially new guys coming in. But let's take a quick look on how the Canadiens lineup will shape up. So on the first line, in terms of offense, it's going to stay relatively similar with Suzuki, Caulfield, Slav. We know what they bring to the table. Another year for this line together is going to be absolutely electric. I think going into last season, we were really excited, and they obviously brought it together in the second half of the year, pushing the Canadiens to the playoffs. Suzuki setting a career high in points, Caulfield setting a career high in goals, and Slav continuing to take the next step in his point production and how he develops as a player. In terms of the second line, we're still looking at Patrick Laine, assuming Kirby Dach is ready to go for the start of the regular season. We're hoping he can get back into form and really taken the, learning experience from last year's injury and trying to find the right way to recover from this injury and coming back as strong as possible. So we assume that he'll be the second line center coming to this season. And obviously, Ivan Demidov, Calder Watch, our superstar player in the making, that's shaping up to be a very, very interesting second line. A lot of different pieces. Demidov, the playmaker, Laine, the shooter, and Kirby Dach bringing like that offensive force, that driving force, I should say. This is where it takes a bit of a turn here on the third line. Alex Newhook, I think there's a lot to talk about him in terms of what he showed in the playoffs this season and towards the end of the regular season as well. He, I think, is best suited as a third liner, and I think you would agree with that. I think Jake Evans probably steps into a third line role after re-signing 4 years with the Canadiens. He obviously showed that he has a lot of promise in this league, and even at a guy peaking at 29, he looks really, really solid as a 3C. And then Josh Anderson, a guy who, again, showed that he can play that Tom Wilson type role, in your face, hard hitting, and just driving the pucks to the net. I know we have his knacks on him a lot of the time, but he is a guy that you need for the playoffs and you need on your team to create a type of identity. In terms of the fourth line, harder to predict because Joel Armia and Christian Dvorak are UFAs, and we're not exactly sure what's going to happen with them. It sounds like Christian Dvorak has some interest on the open market, but based on his play in the playoffs, he can potentially get a short-term deal with the Canadiens. We'll see. But right now we have Brendan Gallagher, heart and soul, along with two young players who are going to be rookies as well if they do make the team, with Oliver Kapanen, and Owen Beck at center.
I think it's an interesting lineup. I think, look, we didn't even get to the D yet, and I think that's probably obviously after the Dobson trade where the Canadiens took the biggest step. Obviously going to be relying on some performances this season, right? Where we are banking on Demidov to, right, he's been in Montreal training. I think that this is going to be a huge season for him, obviously rookie season, but I think there's a lot of expectations. I would say almost unfortunately, but it is the truth. Kirby Dach, there's a lot of expectations in terms of bouncing back, recovering mentally and physically, and ensuring that he can get a good start. And same for Laine. He left last year in the playoffs with an injury, but it didn't change the fact that his play was not where it needed to be. So if that's going to be a line going into next season, we got to ensure that there's going to be some point producing from that line. Liam, I was just looking at it while you were reading out the lines. From a 2C perspective, a lot of people all over Twitter and social media, I don't want to say are upset, but are concerned that the Canadiens decided to go out and trade for Noah Dobson while leaving that 2C spot kind of in the unknown. You know, Bo Horvat's on the table. People have been speculating about Matt Barzal, not to the Habs in particular, but I'm just saying on the fact that they're in contract negotiations themselves, especially with Barzal. Or no, sorry, neither of them are in contract negotiations, but Dobson was. I think the question that I'm going to ask you is that I was just looking at the free agents left, RFA and UFA. One name that pops or that stands out to me, 33 years old, but could be a good option for the short term or midterm, Mikael Granlund. Traded to Dallas mid-season last season, put up 21 points in 31 games. And then with San Jose in his first 52 games, he put up 45 points. Those are some impressive numbers. Obviously, former ninth overall pick in 2010. He's had a kind of an up and down career, found his footing a bit late in Minnesota, then with Nashville. Anyway, all this to say, is that an option? Is that something that you would be interested in or maybe could be that good midterm option for the Canadiens at 2C?
I mean, Granlund is a great player, and I think he showed that in the playoffs with Dallas, that when he's in that position to succeed, he comes up big in the right times. But I also think Laine and Granlund would have a good connection as well, both Finnish players. I think there's a lot of guys that are probably available that we're not hearing about that could be a good fit. And a guy that comes to mind is Ryan O'Reilly. I think Mikael Granlund is going to be looking for a longer term contract, and I think he's going to get it and be overpaid just based on the fact that, you know, he had a great playoff and great last season. So I'm not counting Granlund, or I'm not taking him out of the picture, but I think a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, a short-term deal, or I don't know how many years he has left on his contract, actually. So we would take him on for the remainder of his contract, and I feel like he can slot into that Canadiens lineup really well as a 2C. But call me crazy, and I'm kind of changing the topic here, but I'm happy to run it back with Kirby Dach. I think he's a guy that showed promise when he played, and right before he got injured, he was kind of getting back into the groove of things. And if I'm looking at this offensive lineup right now, I'm very happy with this top 9. But I think depth is where the Canadiens need to focus on in free agency, getting a guy for like $1 million, $2 million, bringing in a vet presence. Like, I mean, for example, a player like Corey Perry would do wonders for this team, because a fourth line with 2 rookies is not exactly the recipe to success. And this team is very, very young once again, with 3 rookies on the team if Beck, Kapanen, and Demidov are all on this in this lineup. So I think Kent Hughes has addressed the defensive need, the right-handed shot defenseman. But if I'm like comparing this team to a Florida Panthers and a Vegas Golden Knights, those teams won because of their depth. And I think a fourth line is obviously not the most important piece to a team, but it's something that you need to have and need to address, because that's where those vet guys come in and play a significant role in the locker room and score those big goals, because they've been in this situation, whether it's a playoff game or, you know, they're trying to clinch or any significant moment for the Canadiens. These are some of the players that step up, and they're very important. So that's where I feel like the Canadiens need to address their lineup right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that actually also brings up the point that you brought up a little bit earlier of maybe the Canadiens decide to re-sign Christian Dvorak, because at this given moment, we're banking on the potential based off our projected lineup that Owen Beck and Oliver Kapanen will slot in somewhere there. One of them will play the center position, and then you're going to have Jake Evans and Kirby Dach. But look, I love Jake Evans, but I think he's the perfect fourth line center. Very versatile when need be, but I rather him start at the 4C spot and maybe just run it back with Christian Dvorak and say, look, we're going to sign you a little bit cheaper, a little bit shorter term. You know where the team is going, but we like you here for the meantime. The way you gelled with Gallagher and Anderson in the playoffs was what we needed. And I think that really speaks to what you're talking about right now. I think you need that vet presence. Look, I'm going to say it right now because it was just reported. Claude Giroux just signed an extension with the Sens. 1 year, $2 million base salary with the potential to earn an additional $2.75 million for a total of $4.75. That's the type of Claude Giroux is a more skilled player than Christian Dvorak. But the point is that to bring in someone who can play that role while also bringing that vet presence is really, really important. And if they have to look inward and say, we want Dvorak back, so be it.
Yeah, and I think those types of deals is what the Canadians need to look for. Like that Jamie Benn, it was like a million base salary, but it can go up to a certain amount, like over 4 million. And the same thing, like Jonathan Taves getting a $2 million deal, but if he hits all his bonuses, it goes up to like 5.5. So these are the types of cap maneuvers the Canadians need to focus on. And I think Kent Hughes has, the right expertise and the right mindset to pull this off. But yeah, just going back to it, again, a guy like Christian Dvorak is great. I just think there's also other players out there that I think they need to explore to solidify their lineup.
Definitely agree. Let's move on to the decor now. So we took a look at the forwards. Look, I think overall we can live with that. I think, like I said, the Canadiens are definitely going to be banking on some performances. Some guys are going to have to come out of the woodwork and step up because it's not going to be the first line all season that's going to be producing. So we'll see how that goes. The decor, however, obviously took the biggest hit in the best possible way, adding a right shot defenseman in Noah Dobson, a first pairing defenseman in Noah Dobson. And it's going to be interesting to see how the pairings shape up. But Liam, I'm going to speak on behalf of both of us here. These are the pairings that we think make the most sense entering the season. And this is barring the idea that David Reinbacher could or may make the team, but we're not operating under that assumption right now. We're just going to roll with the guys that are on the roster and expected to play. First pairing on the left. Again, this is, I don't want to say no particular order, but anyway, Caden Gooley on the left side, Noah Dobson on the right. Second pairing, Lane Hutson on the left, Alex Carrier on the right. Third pairing, Mike Matheson on the left, Jaden Struble / Arbor Jacki on the right. Now, I wonder what you guys think, but I just love the idea. I just think it's such a smart idea to bring in Dobson. I mean, you get that right shot, you're solving that issue, or you're filling a really big void. Like many teams don't have the ability to just slot in a guy like him. And we're also talking about the fact that like Reinbacher might make the jump this year, but if it's not this year, it's going to be the next. And when we have Dobson, Reinbacher on the right side and Gooley, Hutson on the left, I think that might be the best decor or the best top four in the league when everyone's in their prime.
Yeah. That top four has the potential to be one of the best. Like thinking back to like a 2016 Nashville Predators decor with Subban, Yossi, Ekholm. I don't even know, Ellis was on that team. Like that's the type of decor that gets you to the finals, that gets it done. And one thing the Canadiens did in this case was they also got bigger on their defensive end, and that's a huge part. Nowadays in the NHL, all the decors are over like 6'3", barring like that one small shifty defenseman, and we have that in Lane Hutson. So it's really all coming together right now. 2 years ago, the Canadiens didn't have a defenseman that had probably over 40 points, other than like maybe Jeff Petrie did. But regardless, in the matter of 1 year, the Canadiens now have a 70-point defenseman who's likely to be point per game this year based on what he did last year, and a two-way puck-moving offensive defenseman in Noah Dobson now. So the great part about adding Noah Dobson is that it takes away the pressure from Mike Matheson if he is to stay with the Canadiens. Mike Matheson is a great defenseman, but I don't think he's a D1 or D2, and I think we saw that this year. He got exposed a lot of the time. Playing 26 to 28 minutes in the playoffs obviously is not capable for him. He made a lot of mistakes, but being in a smaller role now, if he's a second line D-man and arguably our fourth best defenseman now, maybe we see like the resurgence of Mike Matheson this season.
Yeah, maybe in a more sheltered role, right? I think
exactly.
When you play less minutes, you maybe play a little. You obviously keep your guard up a bit, but I also think that Mike Matheson is a great skater, but he's too mistake prone to be playing that many minutes. We saw it firsthand. I think the front office saw it firsthand because they wouldn't go out and just acquire Noah Dobson if they truly believed that Mike Matheson could be your PP2 defenseman consistently. Obviously, he's more of an intermediary guy. I don't think that anyone was ever banking on Mike Matheson being part of the future, but at one point he's going to have to start taking less minutes so that the younger guys that are going to be on this team for a longer time are able to actually play some significant minutes, because we've always said it. The more significant minutes you play, the more mistake prone you are. But the more mistake prone you are means that you're probably going to get to a place as a hockey player to understand the game a lot better. So that's what we saw with Lane Hutson. He was thrown into a lot of tough situations. The same will be said for Dobson, but obviously many more games under his belt. But the same is going to be said for Ryan Backer. You're going to want him to play the second that he's available and ready as an NHL ready defenseman, and that's going to be the Mike Matheson has to go out the door. Last thing, just on the Mike Matheson front, because it just made me think of it. There were rumors and speculations with regards to another 2C, or maybe a 1C on another team, but I would characterize him as a 2C, Jordan Kyrou. The only reason I bring up Mike Matheson is because there were some fake-ish rumors going around about how Mike Matheson might be a part of a trade to St. Louis for Jordan Kyrou, but I don't want to talk about that trade speculation. I just wanted to talk about Jordan Kyrou as a player. Is that someone that you would be interested as 2C for the Canadiens? Is that something that fits the mold?
I didn't even know he was like able to play center, because on St. Louis he always played wing with Robert Thomas. So, I mean, I don't really understand it. Just because if he were to come to the Canadiens, if he is a center, sure, that would be absolutely amazing. But he hasn't had much experience, I want to say, in the NHL as a center. And if he were to be traded from the Canadiens or by the Canadiens, I don't know where he would slot in exactly, because they have Slav, Cole, Laine, Demidov. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like the Canadiens are looking to extend Laine. And that kind of just pushes somebody down, probably not where they should be slotted in. So look, Kyrou's a hell of a player, point per game guy, 40 goal plus score in the past. I just don't see the appeal when I feel like you should go out and get a guy who's played center most of his career.
Yeah, I also think that the knack on Kyrou is I say it's a knack, but it's that he's mainly offensive, right? He's a skill guy, very quick, goal scorer, pure goal scorer. However, in the long term, you're going to want a guy that could play both ways. And not that Kyrou's bad at it, but it's just that he's not good at it. And I think that that's why they might deviate or look elsewhere instead of looking to Kyrou.
Yeah, and the fact is Demidov and Laine are also not the strongest defensive players at this point. So you need a guy on that line, if it is a line, to balance that out.
Absolutely. Now we'll take a look at the power play. Liam and I came up with a unit that might be different than what people might expect. This is, Liam mentioned it to me before, is kind of going the Washington Capitals route with the two defensemen. But if we were to look at the setup, it would look like Uri Slavkovsky in front of the net, Cole Caulfield on that left side for the one-timer, Nick Suzuki in that, well, I guess now probably in that bumper spot, right? And then you would have Lane up top and Dobson, the right shot. It's not going to look like a one-timer, or you just flip-flop Lane, Dobson at the top and Lane on the right side. Nonetheless, I think it's a really, really, really interesting idea. I think the ability to have two defensemen on the first unit is honestly, I'll call it a luxury. Like, it's not something that's easy to come by, but when there's two defensemen that are that good offensively, why not do it? I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Washington is the only team in the NHL that runs two defensemen on their PP1 unit. And bringing in a guy who put up 70 points 2 years ago, that's a power play one defenseman. Noah Dobson, again, big guy, moves the puck well, but also has a hell of a shot. The guy scores goals. So I think bringing him onto the first power play unit with the Canadiens' first line and Lane Hutson also opens up the opportunity for the second unit to be much, much better, which we haven't seen as Canadiens fans in a long, long time. So in terms of the power play 2 unit, Nick Suzuki did play both units last season towards the end of the year. So I think they might want to change that up coming next season. So we have Alex Newhook in the bumper spot, Kirby Dach, I'd say in front of the net likely, Demidov on the right side, Laine on the left, and Mike Matheson at the top. Obviously, this can change depending on if Gallagher is a net front guy, since he's been a lot of the time in the past few seasons. But looking at this second unit, I'm going to be excited when they come on the ice as well, because Demidov and Laine can really, really cook something up there.
Yeah, I wonder. I think the problem that I have with it has nothing to do with the first power play and the way it's set up. It's more just the fact that I think the second power play in the NHL as a whole, and maybe I'm generalizing a bit here, only probably gets on. They'll never be on the ice for more than a minute max.
Yeah.
And I know, and that makes sense, right? It's usually split 50-50, but a lot of the times the first unit might stay out for a minute and a half, which is more common than you might think. And maybe that won't be the case with how good and creative and skilled that second unit is. But to me, it begs a question, Liam, about Patrik Laine, who we could look back to last season, and the majority of his goals came on the power play, specifically PP1. And now you take him off that PP1 unit and you make him a PP2 guy. Now I'm a bit curious as to what his value actually is. Because unless something drastic changes and we see pre-injury Laine, I don't know if he's going to be as effective, ever going to be as effective as he once was at 5-on-5. And if that's the case, and now we're sheltering him on the PP2 with not much exposure, I kind of have a little bit of a hard time validating the idea of he's getting paid $8.7 million right now. And the fact that, like you mentioned, there's the possibility that they extend him. And I just don't see a world where extending him does anything for the Canadiens in a positive aspect. I'm not saying it because I dislike the player. I'm saying it because right now, I think they took the shot. They saw what he's capable of, but I just don't know if it's the right time or the right fit for this Montreal Canadiens team. I don't know if you agree, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I also don't think his next contract is going to be close to what he's making right now, unless he has some absolutely amazing season. But I just don't know if he's in the position to produce like he once did in the past with Columbus and Winnipeg. Just because he's not on that first line anymore. He's not, he's potentially might be a power play 2 player like we just talked about. So, I mean, I think we should give our guesses on what his next contract might look like, but I'm thinking it's like 6.5-7 million 4-year deal. If it's with the Canadiens.
I really don't mind the number at all. I don't. But then I also look at it and I say, well, 6.5-7 million is realistically not a stupidly expensive contract, especially with the salary cap heading in the direction that it's heading. But at the same time, I just don't think it's like we're going to be paying Patrik, or the Canadiens are going to be paying Patrik Laine to be a power play specialist, not on PP1, and ineffective at 5-on-5, probably in a second/third line role. There were many times last year, Liam, that he was playing 11-12 minutes a game.
Yeah.
That's
but we got to remember that he was coming off a major injury, didn't play more than 20 games 2 seasons ago. So I feel like this summer will dictate a lot about his next deal. And I don't think the Canadiens can extend him before seeing what he does next season.
100%. I just also think that teams pay guys, you said it best once, you pay guys based on availability as well. And knowing Laine's history in terms of injuries, knowing that he probably will never again play an 82-game season is a bit worrisome. Now, if you told me right now that in a year from now, the Canadiens, as of July 1st, we're going to pay Patrik Laine $7 million for 4 years, I'd be fine with it. But at the same time, I do think that this season is going to be very, very indicative of his contract if he gets one with the Canadiens. Because if he goes out there and let's say he plays 70 games. Let's say he plays 70 games, he misses 12. He plays 70 games and he puts up, I want to say like just south of 45 points, and he puts up like 25 goals, 27 goals. I don't think I would give him the 4x7. I don't. I rather another team take that chance and let us continue. Like we can look, last thing I'm going to say on it. It's also very easy for Hughes and Gorton to say, we tried. It didn't work out. Let's move on, because the assets they gave up were not significant. So it's not like there's much cost there.
In the future, if that's the case, and Kirby Dach is a failure as well, that's 2 big holes to plug on the Canadiens lineup. That's your second line right wing and your second line center. So that's going to be something big to address in the next coming year slash 2 years when Kirby Dach's contract is up as well. So we'll see how that pans out. In terms of the salary cap, right now at this point, I believe it's 88 million. It is projected to go up to 113 million in 3 seasons. So that obviously opens the door for the Lane Hudson extension, the Ivan Demidov extension. But one thing I just want to talk about quick is how well the Canadiens have structured their team in terms of contracts. If we're comparing the Canadiens' contracts to other teams, let's just say the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know this is an extreme case, but you can look at other Canadian teams like the Oilers as well. There's not a single player on the Canadiens making over 10 million. And other than Noah Dobson and Patrick Laine's final year on his contract here, there's not a guy making over 7.8 million. If we're looking at 3 years in the future, this opens the door for another big free agent to come in and sign with the Canadiens for over 10 million when the cap is at that 115, and then even after that, probably over 120 at that point. So if we are looking at those two big holes to plug eventually in the future, if Kirby Dach and Patrick Laine don't work out, there's a lot of room to bring in someone really big and really make an impact on this Canadiens team.
Yeah, I agree. And it actually, it's funny because you go back, what was it, last off season or 2 off seasons ago when the LA Kings signed Pierre-Luc Dubois for his big deal, 8 years, north of 8 million, correct?
Yeah.
North or whatever, it was around there.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's funny because a lot of people in the, Twitter and social media were saying, oh, like go out and sign Dubois. He could be the best player on the Canadiens. Not that, and he had a great season with Washington this season, but I just think it's funny how, like, again, like you mentioned, that structure that they've put in place. They don't want to be paying guys more than Nick Suzuki. They made that abundantly clear. Noah Dobson, I don't want to say he's an exception to the rule, but I think, again, a right shot defenseman who's put up 70 points, that's a luxury. You have to sometimes bend the rules. And it's going to be interesting to see how they bend the rules for Lane Hudson. Is he a $9 million defenseman? Is that someone you can lock up for a little bit cheaper because he's bought into the idea that the Canadiens are heading in the right direction? Same thing with Ivan Demidov. There's no doubt that these guys are going to want to get their paydays, but it's a question of, can they hold off just a bit in order for this core to do its thing at the right time? And I guess time will tell.
If you're coming into the Montreal Canadiens as a free agent or a sign and trade, you're buying into the system. You are leaving money on the table that you could have gotten elsewhere because you were buying into this team that has a winning culture, that's built on Stanley Cups, that's built on success. You're not going to a team, no diss, but it's a slight diss. You're not going to a Californian team that, like San Jose or Anaheim, or maybe even a Midwestern team right now like Chicago, who's had success in the past, but those are teams that are just shoveling out money because they need to bring in big players and they need to speed up their rebuilds. But when you're coming to the Canadiens, you're leaving money on the table and you're buying into this system. And I think Kent Hughes has done an outstanding job building that up since the departure of Marc Bergevin and previous staff on the team.
Absolutely. I don't think the Montreal Canadiens are done. I do think that there's some work to be done. And again, they made that very, very clear by trading those picks in the draft. I genuinely don't believe that when 2026 comes around and the Canadiens are on the board with their first round pick, whether it's in the 20s or even whether it's in the teens again, I just don't see a world where they go out and make that pick. I think that they are completely bought into the idea that this team and the core that they have is what they want to build around. And to do so, they're going to have to trade those picks. I do think, Liam, that the holes that need to be filled, and we can argue that it's 2C, and we can even argue that it's the depth. I think the depth will be easy. I think we'll just see next season, or even maybe this season. It's going to depend heavily on the Dvorak and Armia situation, and especially when Anderson and Gallagher are out the door the following season. But I think we're just going to start getting notifications on our phone. The Montreal Canadiens signed X player to X deal, very cheap, team friendly, bought into the culture, get that over with. It's the 2C that concerns me. And I'm almost surprised, as much as I'm very, very happy with the Dobson trade, I'm almost very, very surprised that this 2C wasn't addressed before this type of move. Not in a bad way, just in a surprising way.
I think it was just something that the Canadiens needed to jump on right away. Like, the opportunity became available. It was a guy who wanted to come to Montreal, which sometimes is very difficult to find because of, taxes and language in Montreal as well, and you're in the spotlight in Montreal. It's the most hockey crazy city in the world. So I think it was an opportunity that came available, and the Canadiens need to jump on it. I also think the fact that Kirby Dach is assumably coming back healthy, he still has a second line role on this team, so we'll see how that pans out. And also in terms of the fourth line, can't forget that there are some really, really good players that are being developed in the AHL with the Laval Rocket, whether that's Florian Jacki, who's a 25 goal scorer as a rookie in the AHL, a huge body, and what his brother brings. He brings the same aggressive style, and again, another guy who can be like a Tom Wilson and just be an absolute threat in the playoffs. Also, a guy like Luke Tuck, who has that similar build, a brother in the NHL, comes from a hockey family, so he knows what he has to do to get it done. So I think at this point, it's the Canadiens having to go out, sign a vet for a year, a 2-year deal, continue to develop their prospects and young players in the AHL, and eventually build within. And I think that's a huge part of the Canadiens. You're building within.
Love it. Love it. I think this is heading in the right direction. I think we've kind of preached the same thing over and over again in many of our episodes, but that brass just continues to do the right work and take the right steps. And you know what? I'm going to be honest. The aggressiveness to say we're going to go out and trade for Noah Dobson and then sign him, the aggressiveness to go out and trade for Patrick Laine, the aggressiveness to take a shot on Sean Monahan, the aggressiveness on Newhook, the aggressiveness on Kirby Dach. I know it's getting annoying with what I'm saying, but the truth is that if you go back to 2020, 2021, when the Canadiens made the final under Bergevin, Bergevin's plan, whatever it was taking way too long with zero results. And you know what the truth is that Marc Bergevin still has a job in this league, not as a GM, but higher up with LA. And the truth is that Jeff Molson could have sat back and allowed this to continue. He could have, because why would you fire him after going to a Stanley Cup final? And then I know they finished last, but why? He didn't need to. He did not need to, but thankfully he did. And I'm very happy with the mentality and the mindset. And I think it's honestly just getting started. But I do think that the second that they find that 2C solution and kind of, fill out that depth, this is going to be a scary team. And it wouldn't surprise me if you're top 4 in the Atlantic.
Yeah, that would be unreal.